I just want to know what happened to my babies. Someone must know something.
And then he said, "That's not my turkey!"
Oh, George, you are too funny.
On Christmas Eve, 1945, a night of joy, laughter, and family warmth. But for the Sodder family, that warmth would soon turn into horror. In the blink of an eye, their home was engulfed in flames and 5 of their 10 children vanished, without a trace. What really happened that night? Was it an accident or something far more sinister? Subscribe to the True Crime Report for the full story, where every mystery has a chilling truth waiting to be uncovered. Now, let's get back to the full story. Christmas Eve, 1945. Inside the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, the scent of pine and freshly baked bread filled the air. The radio crackled softly in the corner, playing a Christmas carol that drifted through the warm glow of the living room. George and Jenny Sodder were proud Italian immigrants, known for their generosity, strong work ethic, and love for their 10 children. Their house stood tall on a quiet hillside, a symbol of everything they had worked for since leaving Italy behind. That night, laughter echoed through the rooms. The older children were tired from helping with chores and had already gone to bed, while the younger ones, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, begged their mother to stay up late to play with their new toys and admire the Christmas lights. Jenny finally agreed, smiling. "Just a few more minutes," she said, as the clock ticked past midnight. At 12:30 a.m., the house had grown still. Jenny was half asleep when the telephone rang sharply through the darkness. She climbed out of bed, confused, and picked up the receiver. A woman's voice spoke softly on the other end, polite but strange. She asked for a man Jenny didn't know. Jenny could hear the faint clinking of glasses and laughter in the background, like a distant celebration. When she said the caller had the wrong number, there was a brief pause, then the woman chuckled, low, unsettling, and hung up, puzzled. Jenny replaced the phone and looked around the quiet house. The children's laughter was gone, replaced by the faint hum of winter wind outside. As she turned to head back to bed, she noticed something odd. The curtains glowing faintly as if touched by light. But this wasn't Christmas light. It was something else. Something alive, flickering and spreading fast. Jenny froze for a moment, her heart racing. That faint orange glow wasn't from the Christmas lights. It was coming from downstairs, and it was moving. She rushed to the hallway, shouting for George. By the time he reached her, smoke was already creeping up the staircase like a dark wave. The smell of burning would fill the air. George ran toward his office. Flames had already consumed the corner of the room where his fuse box and phone line were mounted. He tried to pull open the front door, but the heat pushed him back. The fire was spreading too fast. "Get the children," Jenny screamed. The older ones, Mary and Sylvia, John and George Jr., scrambled down from their rooms, coughing through the thick smoke. But 5 of their siblings, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were still trapped upstairs. George smashed a window with his bare hands, slicing his arm open as he tried to reach the staircase. The flames roared up in response, blocking his path completely. He shouted their names, but only the sound of crackling would answer. Thinking fast, he ran outside to grab his ladder, the one he always kept leaning against the house. But it was gone, vanished. He sprinted to his trucks, desperate to drive one close enough to climb to the children's windows. But neither would start. Both had worked perfectly the day before. Neighbors woke to the sound of screams and came running, but the phone lines were dead. The fire department was nowhere in sight. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. For 45 long minutes, the Sodder home burned like a torch in the cold night. And when the roof finally collapsed, everything they had built, their memories, their laughter, their family, was swallowed by the flames. When the smoke cleared at dawn, George and Jenny searched through the ashes with trembling hands. But what they found wasn't the remains of their children. What they found was nothing. When the fire finally burned itself out, dawn crept over Fayetteville like a ghost. The air was thick with smoke and silence. The Sodder home, once full of laughter, was now nothing but a pile of blackened debris. But amid the ashes, something was terribly wrong. There were no bones, no skulls, no remains, Nothing to prove that 5 children had perished in that fire. George and Jenny refused to believe it. They searched the ruins themselves, hour after hour, sifting through ashes, hoping to find even the smallest sign of their children.
I just want to know what
But the
happened to
ground
my
gave them
babies.
nothing. When the fire chief arrived,
Someone
he
must
told
know
them not
something.
to worry. He said the fire had burned so hot that the children's bodies were completely destroyed. But that explanation didn't make sense. Experts later confirmed that even at extreme temperatures, human bones don't disintegrate completely. Not in a house fire. Jenny couldn't let it go. She began to test it herself. She burned animal bones in her own stove. Pig bones, chicken bones, even large beef bones. Every time, the bones survived. They charred and cracked, but they didn't vanish. So how could 5 children disappear without leaving a trace? The family's grief soon turned to suspicion. Something about that night didn't add up. The phone call, the missing ladder, the dead trucks, and the fire chief, the one who promised to search the ashes, waited hours before coming. As George and Jenny looked over what was left of their home, they both knew deep inside, this wasn't just a tragedy. It was a beginning of something darker, something that someone, somewhere, didn't want them to uncover. The investigation began almost immediately, but from the start, it felt wrong. The local fire department had been slow to respond that night. In fact, it took them nearly 7 hours to arrive, even though the station was less than 3 miles away. Their excuse? They said they couldn't find anyone to drive the truck. When officials finally showed up, the scene was already cold. No forensic work was done. No samples were taken. And within just a few days, authorities declared the case closed, blaming it all on faulty wiring. But George and Jenny knew their house wiring had recently been inspected and passed a safe. Even stranger, the house lights had stayed on while the fire burned. Something impossible of an electrical fault had started a blaze. The Sodders began their own investigation. They discovered that their telephone lines hadn't burned. They had been cut. Someone had intentionally severed them from the pole outside before the fire even started. Then came the discovery of the missing ladder. It was found weeks later, lying in a ditch far down the road, too far for the wind or accident to have carried it. Witnesses soon stepped forward with chilling accounts. One woman claimed she saw a man on the Sodder property the night of the fire, stealing parts from George's trucks. Another said she saw strange flashes, like small fireballs, being thrown onto the Sodder roof just before the blaze began. And then came the most haunting reports of all. Several people claimed they saw the Sodder children alive. The very next day, one woman said she spotted them peering out of a car window, driving away from town. Another claimed she served them breakfast at a roadside diner. Each time, they were described as quiet, scared, and accompanied by adults who refused to speak. Every lead seemed to fade into silence, but the more the Sodders searched, the more it felt like someone or something was working hard to keep the truth buried. And then, years later, a new discovery would take this mystery even deeper. Years passed, but the fire never left the Sodder family's minds. The official explanation that their children had burned to ash simply didn't fit. So George and Jenny refused to stop searching. They rebuilt their home, raised new billboards, and sent letters across the country, pleading for any information that could explain what happened that Christmas night. Then, one quiet morning in 1968, more than 20 years after the fire, Jenny checked the mail and found something that would reignite every fear she'd ever buried. It was a plain envelope, no return address, postmarked from Kentucky. Inside was a single photograph of a young man. On the back of the picture, scrawled in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie. Illo boys, a 90132 or 35. Jenny froze. The man in the photograph looked almost exactly like her missing son, Louis. The same dark eyes, the same strong jawline, just older. The resemblance was haunting. George and Jenny took the picture to investigators, private detectives, and handwriting experts, but no one could trace where it came from. The postal trail ended cold. Even the FBI, when approached again, refused to reopen the case, saying it was a local matter. Still, Jenny couldn't let go. She framed the photo and hung it on her living room wall. right beside the family's Christmas portrait from 1945. Every night before bed, she stared at both pictures, whispering a silent prayer. Was Lewis alive? Had someone taken the Sodder children and raised them under new names? And if so, who would do such a thing? The more they searched, the stranger things became. Anonymous phone calls, a woman's voice telling them to stop digging, and reports of government men visiting locals, warning them not to talk about the night of the fire. The Sodders were convinced now their children hadn't died. They'd been taken. But by who and why, no one knew. And then one night, years later, a new clue appeared, something buried deep in the ashes that would change everything. By the late 1960s, most of Fayetteville had moved on, but not the Sodders, not George, not Jenny. They couldn't let go of the feeling that something or someone still lingered behind the smoke of that night. And then something did resurface. During a small excavation near where the old house once stood, a strange object was found, a rubber-like casing half melted, with a distinct metal nozzle. Experts identified it as a napalm or phosphorus grenade cap, the kind used in military-style firebombs during World War II. It wasn't the kind of thing a civilian could just have lying around, and it certainly wasn't something that could be blamed on faulty wiring. This single clue reignited the investigate. The Sodders began to suspect that the fire was no accident. It was a targeted attack. But who would want to destroy a family in small-town West Virginia? And why take the children instead of killing everyone? Aside, rumors began to spread. Some said George had been outspoken against Mussolini during the war, and that local fascist sympathizers had threatened him for it. Others whispered about insurance disputes, cover-ups, or even child trafficking rings that operated in the shadows of post-war America. Each theory twisted the story deeper into darkness. Even more unsettling, a neighbor later claimed she saw men watching the fire from a distance, parked along the road, silently observing as the house burned to the ground. When asked why she hadn't spoken up earlier, she simply said, "I was scared. Everyone was scared." The deeper George and Jenny dug, the more they realized the truth might not just be buried in Fayetteville. It might be buried in something much bigger. And then came a chilling message, one that arrived years later and brought the case right back to life. 2 decades had passed since the fire that destroyed the Sodder home. George and Jenny had aged, their hair gray, their faces worn from years of searching, hoping, and heartbreak. Then, in 1968, something arrived in the mail that would shatter what little piece they had left. A plain envelope, no return address. Inside, a photograph of a young man. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, Lewis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie. Illo boys, a 90132 or 35. Lewis, their son, who had vanished in that fire 23 years earlier. The resemblance was undeniable. The same eyes, the same sharp jawline, the same faint dimple on the left cheek. But who sent the photo? And what did that strange message mean? A code? A location? A warning? George and Jenny were convinced this was him. Their son was alive somewhere. They hired private detectives to trace the envelope. It had been postmarked from Kentucky, but beyond that, nothing. The trail went cold. The man in the photograph was never identified. Years later, the family displayed the image on a billboard near their home, alongside the faces of the missing Sodder children. For decades, it stood as a haunting reminder to everyone who passed. 5 children vanished. No bodies found. No justice served. George Sodder died in 1969, still searching. Jenny followed 20 years later, still leaving the porch light on every night, in case her children ever came home. Today, the Sodder case remains one of America's most chilling unsolved mysteries. No official explanation. No recovered remains. Just questions, whispers, and that photo. Was it really Lewis? Were the children taken, hidden away, perhaps even forced to live new lives under different names? Or did the fire hide something darker? Something the world was never meant to uncover? Even now, decades later, the answers remain buried. Somewhere between fire, fear, and silence. Some stories never fade. They linger like smoke after a fire, whispering the same question again and again. What really happened to the Sodder children? Was it a cover-up? A kidnapping gone wrong? Or something much darker, buried deep, beneath decades of silence? The Sodder family spent their entire lives searching for answers, and though time has stolen their voices, their story still speaks. A reminder that some mysteries don't die, they wait to be found. If you found this story chilling, subscribe for more true crime cases just like this. Real stories, real mysteries, and questions the world still hasn't answered. This is the True Crime Report. Thank you for watching, and remember, the truth always leaves a trace.